Hi, welcome back to my garden. Another week's flown by and it's time to make a film. So here we are. This week it's going to begin with a bit of a rant. And I'll lead into the rant with some anecdotes. So maybe that'll, soften the blow. Once upon a time, back in the day when I was a school teacher in Sao Paulo, I was part of a group that established what ended up being a very eagerly looked forward to tradition on the teacher's social calendar, the Piscean Day at the races. It's kind of self-explanatory. We go to the local racetrack, jockey club, which had a conveniently placed, wonderful restaurant right opposite the finish line. And we'd go there for sort of a group birthday celebration of people whose birthdays fell under the sign of the fish. I was one of them. Indeed, I was thinking about this story because it was my birthday last weekend. And it was a lot of fun, loads of beer and caipirinhas, good food, and everyone would be having a little flutter. I had a system to sort of avoid things getting out of hand. I basically put a tenner on each race, and I'd go to the track armed with sufficient tenners, stuffed into one of my pockets, and I knew when that pocket was empty, I was done. My winnings would go into the other pocket. So usually I'd be down 1 week. One year I was actually quite successful, but I suppose on balance, of course, you end up losing. I wasn't an insider, so to speak. Actually, I tell a lie. 1 year, myself and John, one of the other birthday celebrants, the two of us ended up being very much the losers of the day. But that had nothing to do with horse racing and everything to do with people leaving without paying their bill in full and us being stiffed with a quite extraordinarily large bill at the end of the evening. I suppose it was in the region of $400. Not fun, but anyway, we laughed it off, probably because we were very drunk. So I used to do that once a year, and literally just once a year. It was good fun, no harm in it at all. But my second little anecdote is the sort of other side of the coin. And I remember that in primary school, my last year of primary school, I was a very avid reader of the local newspaper. I'd dash off the post box to collect it every morning before my father got his hands on it. And one fine day, I was in some sort of shock because there on perhaps page 2 or perhaps even on the front page was a very close family friend who had just been found guilty. I suppose he was not that in a sort of non-denominational family. We didn't have a godfather, but he was as close to what would have been a godfather. And he received an 8-year sentence for embezzlement. And why? Well, he was a sports journalist, loved sport, but he was also a lawyer. And his particular area of expertise was in the world of inheritance. He managed trust funds and things like that. And he kind of got sucked into a deep, dark, black hole of gambling debt. And as the bookies put pressure on him, and I imagine the threats were non-trivial, he felt the need to sort of dip into the funds that he was managing, and things got out of hand, and he ended up in jail. It was a horrible business, a very brutal, to my young, innocent mind, sort of cautionary tale. And recently I've been thinking about gambling a lot because, as you've probably gleaned, or if you know me well, I love football. But I've been finding myself wanting to drift away from the game. Partly it's because, it's over the years I just became too much of a fan. I went from avid to rabid, and that's not good. It wasn't doing me any good. It certainly wasn't bringing me pleasure. I mean, yes, when your team wins, you're over the moon, but far too often you're in a state somewhere between rage and anxiety, and it's not good. And of course, in our modern social media age, there is information and opinions being sort of launched at you 24 hours a day, and of course that the pundits are playing you like a fool. They are drip feeding you sort of this clickbait attraction of negative news or contrarian opinions, and it can suck you in. It sucked me in. Not doing me any good at all. But there's another element to my desire to drift out of following football, and it is this business of gambling, because frankly, top flight football in any country is dominated by sponsorship from betting companies. And certainly here in Brazil, it's not just the grounds with advertising hoardings or the shirts are sponsored by a company. It's the fact that the players and the commentators all appear, if they are sufficiently high profile, in adverts promoting betting. And there's a little disclaimer, bet in moderation. But of course, these companies are spending millions because they're earning billions. And they're earning billions for two reasons. The one is obviously that there's a lot of people who do get sucked in and lose far too much money on an activity that really should just be a bit of light entertainment, like our Piscean day at the races. I mean, a couple of friends having a wager over the game, fair enough. But even that sort of social betting is not what happens where I live. I mean, I've been there at games, watching them, where, at the local bar, where two friends, probably a little inebriated, end up betting what possibly amounts to 10% of their monthly salary on the outcome of a penalty. And then something happens, and these bets are flying around, and before you know it, there's a fight breaking out, and it's an ugly business. So, I'm talking about the evils of gambling, and I'm sure I don't need to convince you. It's a dangerous game. I mean, besides the fact of people, obviously fueling the betting industry through indiscriminate, wanton and addicted gambling, of course there is the other side to it, that the gambling industry is portrayed, certainly in the movies, if you think of casinos, it is never too far away from the mafia. And when I lived in Peru, I mean, I sometimes wondered, just why were there 10 casinos? And one night late in a pub that seemed to just service people who worked in late night industries. I owned a bar at that point, and friends worked in casinos and places like that, nightclubs and so on. And there was one pub that opened at 4 a.m. And I asked someone one day, and he said, look, don't be naive. Yes, casinos make an enormous amount of money from, the stereotypical, diseased old age pensioner pouring money into slot machines. But they are there, as much as any other reason, to launder money on a monumentally large scale. And I'll leave it to your imagination to work out how they do it. But he assured me it was true. And the reason that there were 10 casinos in Lima was not unrelated to the fact that Lima was one of the major capitals of cocaine trafficking, manufacture and so forth. So, gambling's not a very good thing in my book. And I'm watching how it's playing out with football, and the way that people are just sucked into this by relentless advertising that people don't realize they're being manipulated. They are being their whole thought process and behavior is being controlled. They are puppets on a string. And if you asked the venerable elder statesman of Brazilian football commentary, Galvão Bueno, if you asked him what he thought of it, he'd just chuckle as if it was, nothing to worry about. But obviously it is something to worry about. And drawing people in and attracting them, persuading them that this is a good thing is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. And I guess I started thinking about this video because I introduced a few weeks ago this idea of a broader theme of, why don't we do the things that we actually want to do? And the flip side of it is obviously the big question, why do we do things that we know in our heart of hearts are not good for us, and also on a little bit of reflection bring us far more pain than pleasure? The gambling and the day at the races was just harmless fun. I mean, it really was. We'd have a great day out. We'd get there around about 1-2 o'clock. We'd leave at 8. I suppose the last race was maybe 6. And we'd have a whale of a time. Eat, drink and be merry. Maybe go somewhere later on for some live music. We probably drank too much, and I'm not suggesting that was a good thing. But it was a wonderful day. And it even the day that John and I were royally stiffed with the bill, we laughed it off. I mean, because, well, we did. But the people that have become victims of the sort of brutally addictive gambling, especially online gambling, this is not something to laugh off. We live in a very simple village. I mean, the vast majority of people do not have massive incomes, but there's a little game that people play on the phone, something to do with a tiger, and it's gambling, and people run up. I mean, I heard of someone recently, and their debts amounted to, when their family bailed them out, I'm trying to think, I guess it was in the region of a year's salary. This is appalling. But if you dig into that just one step further, the strategy that these companies are using to suck you in are no different to the strategies being used by Facebook, Google, Instagram, TikTok, and all the other guilty parties. And if I'm going to point a finger at a washed-up football star encouraging you to place bets on the local game, I need to point a far more accusatory finger in the direction of Mark Zuckerberg and all his cronies. Because you are being sucked in, and sometimes it is to your sort of financial detriment, but even if it isn't, it is to your personal detriment in terms of shifting your behavior, manipulating the way you think. None of this is new, these observations. I'm sure, I hope you agree with me. But if we start looking at our own lives, it's very easy to just quickly rationalize or brush off our situation and kind of dismiss it as nothing too serious, when in fact something more sinister is at play. So that's it. I'm not sure if this is going to come across as a dark miserable sort of, as I say, rant, I can't believe that anything that I've offered in the last 15 minutes is new to you. And I do hope that you're not someone who has found themselves drawn in more deeply to, heaven forbid, sort of an out of control gambling addiction, or a sort of very negative, toxic relationship with your local football team, or even just binge social media usage that is spilled out of control. I hope you're not in that category, but it's quite possible that you are, and perhaps in the weeks to come, I will offer some positive alternatives. Otherwise, I hope your lives are filled with joy. I'm having a great time. My birthday was fantastic. Life is good. Here we are. Until next week, from a sunny Brazil, ciao.